Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Geo Institute live stream. Today, in case you don't know what's going on, is Terzaghi Day. It is October 2nd, the anniversary of Karl Terzaghi's birth, the father or the grandfather of soil mechanics, whatever your preference is. I have here in my hand one of our Karl Terzaghi bobbleheads that were so popular they sold out, which, I mean, honestly, we kind of wanted that to happen also. Who wants a bunch of bobbleheads sitting around the office in boxes? But all of those contributions for the bobbleheads went to our student program fund, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. My name is Brad Keeler. I'm the director of the Geo Institute, and welcome to another amazing Geo Institute production. We started celebrating Terzaghi Day. I guess some people were doing it before I got here, but when I got to GI in 2016, we really started going all out, making layered food, putting up the Terzaghi tree, which is in my office this year for the first time since 2019, and sharing links, information, videos, all kinds of stuff about Karl Terzaghi on our social media feeds all day today. So you will note that this morning we started with Michael Bennett and the Geotechnical History blog and his post from last year's Terzaghi Day, reviewing a legendary Karl Terzaghi lecture given by Karl Terzaghi, not one of the Terzaghi lecturers. In 1925, we posted the remarks that Robert Thompson of Dan Brown and Associates makes every year on Terzaghi Day. It's the first thing I see on Terzaghi Day at about 1 a.m. every year. I get an email from Robert wishing everyone a happy Terzaghi Day and reflecting on his legacy and how it's impacted the profession. We'll post our playlist of Terzaghi lectures that's up on the YouTube channel later today, as well as the playlist of Terzaghi Day talks, which is why we're all gathered here this afternoon. Before we get into the specifics of what's going to happen today, I want to give it a shout out and a thank you to our sponsor, GeoPeer. Today's event is sponsored by GeoPeer. When it comes to ground improvement, GeoPeer is the industry leader. With GeoPeer, you can design and build with confidence because we empower you to achieve cost-effective, proven, engineered solutions that meet your project pricing and schedule objectives. We work with you to develop a cost-efficient design that allows for higher design bearing pressures, greater settlement control, and reduced construction schedules. There is no soil type or structure that GeoPeer cannot handle. For more information, call 800-371-7470, visit geopeer.com, or email info@geopeer.com. A few more items before we get to our presenter today. If you don't know anything about the Geo Institute, well, it's Terzaghi Day. What better day than to head over to geoinstitute.org, and there you will find out all kinds of things about us, including that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and that we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. And if you like what you see today, and Sebastian's going to bring it, so you're going to, you want to click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Sebastian liked, subscribed, and got notifications, and he knew when we posted Director's Cut with his coworker this morning. So there you go.
It pays off.
Now, coming to us all the way from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he is Geotechnical Project Manager and Laboratory Manager at American Geotechnical and Environmental Services, Inc. It is Sebastian Lobo-Guerrero. He is an adjunct professor at the University of Pittsburgh. He's repping hard today.
Yes.
He's got the shirt, he's got the mug. 23 years experience in geotechnical engineering, specializing in the design of deep and shallow foundations, earth-retaining structures, and landslide stabilization. He is the author of over 200, that's 200, technical papers and presentations published in scientific journals, geotechnical magazines, and conference proceedings. He's the co-author of the state of Delaware's LRFD Bridge Design Manual, former chair of the Pittsburgh Geo Institute chapter, former director of the ASCE Pittsburgh section, member of the DFI Anchored Earth Retention Committee, and he was the conference chair for DFI 45 in 2020 and DFI 47 in 2022. He's on the board of trustees and president-elect of the Academy of Geoprofessionals, an organization to which a part of my heart belongs. And he just became an ASCE fellow here recently. Huge accomplishment. Big congratulations for that. Among his other achievements, the 2022 DFI President's Award, the 2021 ASCE Lifetime Achievement Award, the 2020 ASCE Civil Engineer of the Year in the Pittsburgh section. Whew. And he got the 2006 ASCE Geo Institute Best Paper on Numerical Modeling. We'll close with that. It is Sebastian Lobo-Guerrero. Sebastian is going to take us through a little bit about Terzaghi's life and legacy today, and the impacts that Terzaghi had on him as a geotechnical engineer. With that, I'm going to turn my camera on, off. Sebastian's going to present. We'll be back at the end for some Q&A. Make sure if you have questions for Sebastian to put them in the chat. Sebastian, it's yours.
All right.
Go for it.
Excellent. You see my screen, right? You should see a beautiful picture of a stamp of Karl Terzaghi, correct, Brad?
Looking good. Yep.
All right. So, yeah, no, thank you very much. This is a very special day to me. I have to emphasize that this is one of the biggest honors, if not the biggest honor of my career. I took it very seriously. I spent my whole summer doing a lot of research and finding pictures and stories. And what I'm going to show you today, I think it's a nice story. I'm going to start with the story of Karl Terzaghi and how he changed the world, and he changed our world forever. Before I start, part of the reference that I use, in case anyone wants to check it, and I recommend you do this, is the Engineer as Artist. Is the biography of Terzaghi by D. Goodman. It's an excellent book. It's a book that changed my life when I read it the first time and confirmed a lot of things when I read it the second time. There is the Buchanan Lecture, which is available on YouTube from 1993 at Texas A&M, when Jean-Louis invited Peck, and Peck did a beautiful presentation about Terzaghi. It's available on the YouTube channel from the Geo Institute. Everyone should really watch it. I actually went to Texas A&M recently. I visited Jean-Louis. I saw the paintings that were done in the 1993 Buchanan Lecture. So it was a very special event, and it's a beautiful recollection of Terzaghi's life. And I also use a lot of the special publication that the International Society of Soil Mechanics and Geotechnical Engineering did. It's a special that is 3 papers talking about the story of geotech. Ralph Peck wrote one about Karl Terzaghi. So all this everything that I'm going to show comes from that. I like to start with this first slide, which is the stamp that is dedicated to Karl Terzaghi, and it means a lot. So it's a picture that means a lot to me. I remember one of my professors early in my career showed it to me, and I thought it was a very good thing. Thanks for the introduction, Brad. Just one little parenthesis before that. I'm originally from Bogota, Colombia. That's where I was born and raised. I came to the University of Pittsburgh to do my master and PhD, and I stay here. Then after that, it connects into what you read, working at AGS Inc., which is really the company that have gave me everything for the last 2 decades in all the projects. And I also teach at the University of Pittsburgh. So that being said, let's get started. What I call Terzaghi in 60 seconds. So what I'm going to try to do is summarize the life of a legend in more than 60 seconds, but I want to say that it's 60 seconds. As preparation of this, I watched all the previous Terzaghi Day speakers. I was very impressed. Obviously I watched it at the time that occurred, but I went back and watched the YouTube videos. John Borland from the Imperial College, Suzanne from the Norwegian Institute, Sergey. There is a lot of great people that have passed through this and have done amazing things. So I'm trying to twist it and give you a version of Terzaghi in a little different way. So buckle up, because we're going to go very fast. So Terzaghi was born in Prague. Prague at that time, it was part of Austria. Today is the capital of the Czech Republic. He was born in Prague. He was in a military family. He grew up in Graz. His dad actually was moved to Graz in Austria, and that's where he grew up, including college. He was not the best student by any standard when he was literally just not interested on what he was learning. He was in engineering, but it was a little apart from him. At some point, he met a couple professors that really kind of brought him back, but he was more into the fight club and the fencing club. He actually got a scarf that he carried the rest of his life as a result of one of these fights. which were not confrontational. This was a club of friends just, getting together to beat each other. I know it sounds crazy these days, but anyway, he had to fulfill his military obligations, so he ended up going and doing his service for the military. He realized he's in love with geology during that time. Even younger, he used to spend a lot of time on the fields. He loved geography, but he loved geology, and I guess what was defined as geology, trying to understand rock formations and things like that. He actually did a translation of a geology manual when he was in the military. After that year, he goes back to college. He finished there. He moved to his early career, his early years. He works in different places. The main ones are Croatia, Vienna, and Russia. That's when he gets exposed to a lot of air retention structures. And keep in mind, the design of air retention structure and foundations at that time was extremely empirical. So on his diary, which is basically The Engineer as Artist by Dick Goodman, Dick Goodman took a whole year of sabbatical, and he went and visited the Norwegian Institute and went through all the journals. Terzaghi had a journal for every day of his life, an entry on his journal for every day in his life. He went through all this and the information that is coming and basically passing it from there. So he goes and spends those years. He, especially after Russia, he comes back to Graz. He obtained his PhD, thanks to a lot of the stuff that he was doing from the practical point of view. This is still a very, very infant of geotechnical engineering. Then it comes the first part that is started involved in ASCE, which is the first US trip. I learned about this trip, I remember, early in my life, and it always impressed me. Terzaghi took from his own money what he made before on these jobs in Vienna, Croatia, and Russia, and he spent it on going 1 year across the US, because the US was doing all the infrastructure projects, including the hydroelectrical projects and dams. So he goes and, he comes to the States and does that trip at a young age, absolutely no support from anyone, just him traveling around, meeting people. But one thing that stands on that is the description that Terzaghi does on his diary of ASCE. When he arrives to New York City, at that time ASCE was in New York City, not on Reston, he spent about 2-3 days completely immersed in this library, and he's just fascinated by ASCE and everything that it has. Last year, I have the opportunity to go to Reston, right, if you remember, and I also immersed myself on the library. I was able to find some documents that are like 120, 130 years later. So I like to think that I was kind of recreating what Terzaghi was doing. And so since that day, you can see that ASCE had a special part on Terzaghi's heart. The trip goes for a year. He goes to Texas and California. He literally went everywhere. He visited all the projects that was going on. He used to do consulting here and there, very casual. Eventually, he ran out of money. He's on the Pacific Northwest. He ended up working as the helper of a driller for blasting. And when the money runs out, he goes back to Austria. World War I is starting because he had his military obligation. He joins the army immediately. He's part of the occupation of Serbia. You have to keep in mind all the geopolitics. So Austria at that part was occupied by Germany. So technically he was on the German side. So he had to go and occupy Serbia. And he was actually in charge of a group. After that, the army decided that his best use is to go to Turkey, to go to Istanbul, to the Royal Ottoman College of Engineering, where he does. And that really is when Terzaghi started teaching. He never taught before. It was not even in his plans to teach, but that was the mission that he was given. Those years are associated with the air pressure theory. Don't take me wrong. We all know Coulomb and Rankine, have theories before. But the way that and this is something that I discovered, let's say in recent years, the way that we understand air pressure theory all come from Terzaghi interpretation. The way that it's presented to us, it all comes from Terzaghi, just interpreting what the others did, but to put it all on a unified way. He also ended up doing a lot of experiments and things like that. So obviously, you know me, I believe more on pictures than words. So, and especially when it comes to PowerPoint presentations, here are some pictures of Terzaghi growing up. On the left, as a young person going into school and then university. On the right, when he was serving on the military service. That's a picture you don't see every day, right? Terzaghi in the military. These are some pictures of the equipment that he had when he arrived to Turkey in the Royal Academy. This is what he was using to measure air pressure. And something that I want to point out since this moment is Terzaghi was a huge fan of understanding principles based on very simple equipment. He always said that if you need a machine that is too big to understand what is going on, it's not worth it. Don't take me wrong. Obviously, you may need, centrifuge machines and huge machines, but the concept, you should be able to get them to something that is simple, that you can control the variables. All right, so World War I ends. He is in the Royal College. Now, he found himself on the wrong side of the equation because obviously, Germany lost, and he is not German, but he's kind of absorbed by German, or he was on that side. But he loves Istanbul. He doesn't want to leave Istanbul. But Robert College basically is the only, like the Royal Academy kicks him out, and Robert College is the only option that he has. And I call it magic in hard conditions. Terzaghi ended up working for them for almost half the salary that everyone else was working. And he literally had no funding because he was being seen as a German in Turkey working after World War II, after World War I. So, it's not easy for him, right? And then what he discovers, what he does is that he realized that he doesn't need much to do what he needed. So he started using tobacco cans, and that's the way that he ended up doing the consolidometer and the permeameter. He literally, the diameter that we have on this equipment come from tobacco cans of that era. And he realized that he can do a lot, understand all these questions that have been surrounding his head for years and decades, trying to simplify them. So that's when he goes also to the Bosphorus, when Terzaghi rock exists. When he sit down, he copy in a notepad what he thinks, geotechnical as a word didn't even exist, but what he thinks soil mechanics should be looking, that understanding between water and soil skeleton and stresses. So that's a very important part, and I think it's a very important era for geotech because that's where the spark started. He documented everything that he did with this test in his book, Urban Mechanics. It's literally the first book, in my opinion, that come, in like the first geotech book, right? He does the book, he publishes it, he continues working in Turkey. He goes to a conference in Netherlands. That's when he actually met Prandtl and von Karman, if you remember, like the water resources part. And he realized that he changed the world because he gets so much feedback on urban mechanics that he feels that things are changing. So, not to make the story long, but he goes back and eventually he ends up getting a lot of offers from different schools. There is a lot of rumors. Columbia, Purdue, different schools want him. He ended up going to MIT. That's really what brings him to the States on this second trip, right? This is the second time he's coming to the States. As soon as he lands, obviously the engineering society, ASCE, and the community already recognized all the great things he was doing with urban mechanics. Now, a little parenthesis, all through this time that I mentioned, he keeps doing consulting everywhere. The guy didn't know how to not do consulting job. Everywhere that he was going, somebody will approach him, he will do a project. So when he comes back to the States, he continues doing all that. And obviously his consulting work is making him very famous. He's approached by ASCE and ENR. He does some translation of certain chapters of urban mechanics. That's the way that urban mechanics end up being, become popular in the US, because obviously the original textbook was not in English. And then in MIT, a lot of great things start happening. He met Arthur Casagrande as a student, and they get a grant, which is the equivalent. I like to think that is the equivalent of what today is AASHTO and FHWA, like let's say the Department for Roads. He get a grant on characterization of materials, and they literally the two of them, mostly Casagrande, they invent the soil lab that we have today. All the machines that we have today, the Casagrande for the limits, classifications, proctors, everything that we do come from this partnership. Arthur Casagrande, in my opinion, next to Ralph Peck, is the biggest collaborations that he had. Arthur Casagrande, his personality was very different than Ralph Peck, and sometimes I feel he doesn't get all the credit that he really should have. But anyway, so they create this, they work for a good amount of years. Terzaghi never felt, and I don't want to offend anyone at MIT, but he never felt that he was being treated fairly at MIT. He didn't feel that he was given the importance that he deserved. And in the middle of all this, the Technion in Vienna comes knocking his door and offering him a return to Europe on a professorship in a really good position, a really good job. So he decided to go, right? For him, he called it in his biography, he called it the dream. This is basically, as a European, right? This is what he was dreaming. So he goes back. When he leaves MIT, he assumes that Arthur Casagrande is going to stay as the head of geotech to continue what he started. Instead of that, Gilboy ended up taking that role. And Arthur Casagrande actually ended up moving to Harvard, which at the beginning created friction with Terzaghi, because Terzaghi thought that, Casagrande, Arthur was kind of, not being loyal to MIT. But what he said is like, well, they didn't offer me the job, so I have to go somewhere else. We're going to see in a few minutes that actually make a huge difference for Terzaghi in his life. So Terzaghi goes back to Vienna. He had great years. He had great years there. He does a lot of consulting, a lot of teaching. He ended up getting a lot more of the students that are really famous. He create the program, and he traveled the world doing all this. But then he felt the hit because World War II is cooking. Now we're moving obviously in time very fast. And Terzaghi realizes that Europe is going to get really bad. In his journals, he describes how Hitler and the Nazi mentality, it's getting everywhere. And obviously he's not really in agreement with that. So he's kind of looking for options to come back to the US. And that's when the international conference, the first international conference on solid mechanics at Harvard happened. This is created obviously with now Casagrande being in Harvard and Terzaghi. There is a connotation. I'm not going to say that it's everything because Terzaghi wanted to get out of Europe, but there is a huge motivation. And in his diary is very clear that Casagrande is trying to bring him into the States and getting out of Europe. There is also a lot of other evidence, like the fact that his second wife, Ruth, was already in Boston. He was moving all his money out of Austria because he knew what was coming. So he comes to the international conference. Obviously, now we really have a profession. Here are a few pictures. Terzaghi with Casagrande. As I said, one of the greatest partnerships that we have seen. This is a picture of the lab that Terzaghi had with all the equipment, very early versions of direct shears, consolidation, different things. Obviously, the permeability. It's very interesting to see that Terzaghi wanted to combine actually the one-dimension consolidometer with the permeameter, but he couldn't, and he recognized that he couldn't. That's the reason that we have two separate ones. The consolidation apparatus is only 1 inch thick. The permeameter is a lot more. But it's very interesting reading on his biography how he struggled with this and eventually have to separate them. This is a picture from that 1936 first conference in geotech that I think every geotech engineer should have. I have my own right here next to me in my house. These pictures means the world to me. I think Geo Institute and Geostrata published it a few years ago. I hope they do it again, and every engineer can just cut it from there and I guess put it as display, because when you go through the list of these, it's amazing. Like all the faces that you see, and these are the heroes that really make the profession that we have today. For me, it's also interesting to see that there were other motivations, right, on doing this. I mean, it was a way also from Terzaghi to get out. So Terzaghi actually go back after the conference. He doesn't stay in the States, but his mind is set. He has to come back to the US, right? I mean, that's where he sees his future. He actually ended up meeting Hitler. Terzaghi did a project with Hitler. Hitler actually called him. He had to go against Terzaghi's desire. He had to go and talk to Hitler. He ended up doing a stabilization for a landslide. He doing also another drill shaft. And that's really when he thinks he's going to become Hitler's right hand, and he doesn't want that. So he ended up leaving Europe in a description that it's amazing. His family was already out, but he literally just leaves one day. He left everything behind in his Vienna office. Years later, the room ended up traveling there and recovering all those documents. But for years, those documents were just abandoned in his office. He comes to Harvard. Casagrande obviously provided the connection. Terzaghi comes here. He becomes a professor there. That's probably where a lot of his legacy is really associated in those later years. Terzaghi continues always being the person that never stops. And I love when you read the biography and when you read his journals, he never stops. He's always thinking, what is the next step? And when he's here, he finds out that Chicago is going to start doing a lot of tunnels for the subway and other things. So he arranged to go and give a presentation on tunnels and excavations on subclays. That just happened to be very coincidental to what they were going to do. Obviously, as soon as he finished his lecture, he has already many people interested for him to work there. Through Casagrande, he ended up meeting Ralph Peck. There is a huge difference in age between Ralph Peck and Karl Terzaghi. Ralph Peck always said, and especially on the Buchanan lecture in 1993, he met Terzaghi when Terzaghi was 50. So he said, I only know the life of Terzaghi after 50. I know before it's just because of the story that he told him, right? But anyway, he met Ralph Peck. He's very impressed. He ended up working in these projects in Chicago. He sent Ralph Peck as the engineer on these projects, and he's doing all this consulting work. Obviously, all this while he's teaching at Harvard. That partnership becomes solid, and they end up doing great things. Ralph Peck eventually, end up finishing all those jobs in Chicago, end up getting a tenure as a professor on Illinois, and the rest is history. I think everyone knows that part. But at that point, the trilogy is complete. So, in the sense of the books, Terzaghi published first Herbomechanics. Then, when he was leaving Europe, he already wanted to do another book, let's say, complement or continue where he started with Herbomechanics. And he wanted to do a book that was mostly foundations. Casagrande advised him and said, you need to do a 2-volume thing. You cannot just throw foundations right now. You have to throw a more practical understanding of soil mechanics. So he decided to do one that is theoretical soil mechanics, but instead of doing the second one as foundations, he does soil mechanics in engineering practice. Two very famous books from Terzaghi. Actually, two books that I'll show in a few minutes. I happen to have original editions of these books. And these books really also changed the world. He consulted with Ralph Peck for these two books, not with Casagrande, with Ralph Peck, because Terzaghi described that Casagrande was too complicated and he was not helping too much on these books. So he consulted with Ralph Peck. Ralph Peck helped him a lot on the first one, theoretical soil mechanics, but Terzaghi decided to publish under his name only. And on the second one, he decided to do it with Peck. So that's the reason that soil mechanics and engineering practice is co-authored by the two. Many, many decades later, Mesri also came into the equation as the third. And then, he continued after that to do lecture, enjoy what he built over the world. He continues to do consulting work everywhere, literally everywhere. Every country that you travel, they always have a story of Karl Terzaghi and something that he did there. He never stopped. He also enjoyed, on this his later part and last part of his life, a variety of university appointments. He loved universities. He loved schools in the U.S. And a lot of his students already were starting programs. Something that I love is when I travel to do presentations in different places, in different universities, I always trace back what student of Terzaghi created that program. And it's amazing because almost every program ended up being obviously started by some student of Terzaghi. He did have a lot of university appointments. He had one in Texas. He also had another time in Illinois that used to drive Casagrande crazy, because Casagrande always felt that Terzaghi should be more time at Harvard rather than doing this. As you can imagine, there is a lot of tensions there for all this. I don't know, I was not alive at that time, but from the books, you see that Ralph Peck sometimes have some tension also with Casagrande, because he kind of, Casagrande had with Peck, because he probably thought that Peck was taking too much of Terzaghi's time, right? So, but anyway, it continues like that. Obviously, nobody lives forever. Unfortunately, Karl Terzaghi ended up, spending his last days in a cabin that he had. He ended up having different phases of working in the UK. He had his last days really are in Canada with Terzaghi Dam and different projects. But he also did the same in Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, everywhere. His legacy stays. That's the reason that today we celebrate his day. ASCE Geo Institute, I believe, is the one that is closest to his heart. Karl Terzaghi described the happiest day of his life, the day that he became an American citizen. That is documented in the book. That shows the love that he had for the engineering and for ASCE and for this country and for everything. So the legacy, thanks to the Geo Institute, I think keeps strong. And I know we do things that to some may look silly, like having the bobbleheads and the pins and the stickers and the cards that we have this year on the geo-congress. But to me, that's extremely important, because that's how we maintain this legend alive. And we also communicate it to the new generation. The Norwegian Geotech Institute also has the legacy. That's a trip that I have not done. I definitely want to do it. They have all the collection of the journals that he has there. Fortunately, we also have Casagrande's collection there. I think it's becoming a really interesting geotech destination, and this legacy really lives everywhere. I mean, as I said, when I travel, I always try to ask about Terzaghi influence, and there is always a project. There is always a project that Terzaghi did close by. In my opinion, he became the first citizen of the world in the geotech world. I mean, he literally loved traveling and doing consulting and teaching, and that's the reason we all celebrate his life, right? It's an amazing person. So here are a few pictures of through his life, with his friends. I mean, obviously, it's a very different era that we have today. This picture to me is very, very special. For those that are not aware, Peck, after he passed away some years ago, his family dedicated this website, peckgeoengineering.org. You can go there and find a ton of pictures of Ralph Peck since he was a kid. Obviously, recently I was browsing through and I found this picture, which is Peck and Terzaghi, and that image right there to me speaks volumes, because you can see the attitude of the two, and you can imagine all that partnership he did, to develop all the trapezoidal air pressure distributions in Chicago with those things, and these two constructed a lot of the world that we enjoy today. Terzaghi with his room, and also Casagrande there. You can see them doing some SPT in a different way a little bit that we do today. That pose of Terzaghi is very famous on the last few years. You can see all pictures everywhere like that. Obviously, I never met Terzaghi. He passed away significantly before I was born. I did meet Ralph Peck. I think that would be my connection, my 2 degrees of separation or something. And but it's great that we still have all these resources to know how was the life of this legend. More pictures with Ralph Peck, I guess a younger version of Ralph Peck. Terzaghi in the lab. Obviously, he was not a person of selfies like I am, right? But he still identified that it was important to document what you do, right? And being very proud of the profession. So I love the picture that he's on the lab analyzing with a microscope and doing things. And the picture on the right side is probably one of the most iconic pictures that we see. If you look closely, you can see the scar that I was referring. This one, I like it a lot because you can see a permeameter. And as I said, Terzaghi was very frustrated that he was not able to combine the consolidometer and permeameter in one. And that he actually, you actually need more than one machine. I think he wanted to have one machine that did it all in a tobacco can that cost nothing. I think it was the way that he was showing the world that even though he was being paid half of his colleagues, and he had no budget to do research on a university, he was still inventing the world. Terzaghi as the teacher, as the educator. It's a complicated picture. I don't know who exactly took it, but I'm very glad they did, explaining concepts from air dams. More iconic pictures of Terzaghi that are everywhere. And then one picture with Ruth, his second wife, and what he described the love of his life. And then more pictures of the man thinking. Now, let's connect with the legacy. And this is what I was saying. I'm a big fan, big supporter of what Geo Institute does, right, in terms of keeping the memory alive. The bobblehead, I think it's a big deal. It is. I mean, I'm very proud to say that I got the first one. And I love that picture on the left because that's exactly when I got it in Charlotte. Obviously, the 96 Club. The Engineer as Artist by Dick Goodman. It's an amazing book. I absolutely encourage everyone to read it. It's published by ASCE. It is very economical. I would say if you buy it, you read it, and you don't like it, send me an email. I'll buy it from you, and I'll give that copy to someone. Because if you read that book and you are not fascinated by this story, I don't know, maybe something is wrong with you. So the pin, the Karl Terzaghi lecture, obviously, that being, the 60th anniversary last year, it's important. And I have a picture there with my bobblehead, the pin, and my two treasures, the theoretical solid mechanics and solid mechanics in engineering practice. I inherited these books from my advisor, Luis Vallejo. He was one of the people that introduced me to Karl Terzaghi more than 20 years ago. It was very special. Dr. Vallejo here at Pitt was a big fan, and a lot of the stories that I'm telling you today, I remember hearing them from them, and obviously then find them on the book. But he always saw the value, and that's the way that I learned geotech engineering. He always saw the value in simplicity, and he always referred back to Karl Terzaghi and say Karl Terzaghi was not he was not the most impressive person in theory and numerical modeling and things like that, but he created what we have, right? There is an aspect of practice that we have to keep in mind, because Terzaghi didn't have a lot of the stuff that we have today, but he did a lot more than we do, right? So that takes me now to the part that is, what do I learn from Terzaghi, right? Beyond the technical aspects. I mean, of course, we all learn from Terzaghi the technical part, right? The classes, the textbooks. When I finished my education, I knew from Terzaghi mostly the technical aspects, right? And a few things about the personality and the genius that he has. But looking back, right, through years of practice and going back and, what I did in preparation for all this, of going back and looking at his journals and at his book and everything, you find that Terzaghi, and he actually lists them, he has three priorities, which I really identify myself with those. Not in any particular order, not saying that one is more important than the other one, but he has three aspects that he believes every geotechnical engineer should focus on. The first one, articles, presentations, publications, professional societies, communication, outreach. Terzaghi was the ultimate outreach person. I mean, he absolutely believed that he needed to tell others what he was learning and what he was discovering. He understood that he could have a career being very quiet and not telling anyone what he was discovering and just working for others, right? But he had that desire of doing these lectures, and he never did a YouTube video, obviously, because it didn't exist. But I can guarantee you that if YouTube was around, or Terzaghi was around the time that YouTube, he will have a channel and he will have 1,000 presentations. He saw the value of all that. He was the first president of the International Society, Solid Mechanics and Geotechnical Engineering. He saw the value of coming together, right? And to me, that's what ASCE and Geo Institute stands for. So that's something that everyone really needs to keep in mind. Another aspect that he always, was covering was consulting projects and professional practice. He always emphasizing the importance of professional practice. You need to do projects. You cannot just stay on the theory. And we'll discuss in a little bit why you can not only stay in the theory, but what we do has a purpose, and it's to do projects, to construct the world that we have and to do it better. So obviously what you're seeing is pictures of me trying to emulate Terzaghi in these aspects. So he always was involved on the projects during design, during construction, always learning on the field, right? Always in touch with contractors, finding out, the new methods, the new, techniques, trying to progress the art based on what contractors is doing. I maintain it. I mean, in this state of the art, one of the major innovators that we have is contractors, right? Because they just keep coming. They just keep coming with ways of doing things bigger and stronger and better. I mean, I was giving a lecture last week about micropiles, and we were also talking about helical piles. When you look the loads that we're putting on micropiles and helical piles, 700 kips, stuff like that is crazy, right? I mean, these are systems that were light, and now they are more than a driven pile. So it's important to always, obviously, do consulting, be involved on design. And I'm kind of, jumping into the construction part, which is equally important. And then the third one is that he always saw the importance of teaching at university level. This is a picture with my students at Pitt. And he always saw that the energy that you get in university environments is amazing. It also helps you guide. There is not, and I still maintain it, there is no better satisfaction than meeting somebody at the university level, helping he or she to find a job, and then being a mentor during the career. I mean, that I have been extremely lucky with AGES and Pitt to connect many people, bring many people from the university, and that is really satisfactory. But it's also it's important for you to be associated with university, because that keeps you, relevant, and that keeps you in touch with what is going on, right? And I absolutely believe there is so many positives of being on campus. That's what I love. Doing presentations on different universities when I get invited. I love touring the programs. I have a mission, I say, that is I need to visit every Geo Institute student chapter in the country, and I'm doing it. I try to, as regular as I can, go to different places. I sit down, I try to travel the day before, sit with all the students, listen to all the research they are doing, taking pictures, taking selfies, posting it on LinkedIn, Facebook, everything. I know it may sound shallow, but I say in 20 years, you're going to thank me so much for these pictures, because it's going to be the documentation of your life. So he obviously saw the priority on doing this, not going and taking selfies, but, to be connected with all this. He was a huge promoter of the American system and the universities worldwide. I mean, he believed that he needed to do this also to create geotech programs, right? He was creating something that didn't exist before. So those were the Terzaghi 3 priorities, which I absolutely identified, as you can see on the pictures from everything. And that really leads us to the next part, which is the complete geotech engineering. And I think this is what Terzaghi also defined, as the trilogy of what a geotech engineer needs to have and the aspects that you need to focus. So what you're seeing there is a picture of me as a student in Colombia, in Bogota, about 1998, so like 26 years ago. He said it's extremely important to focus on theoretical study, classes, analysis, books, professional development. Never stop learning. And Terzaghi never stopped learning. He literally, all his life, he continues to do research. He continued to learn from his own projects. He was never afraid to say that he was wrong before. And that's something that is amazing when you go through his documents. He had no issue saying, what I thought it was this way, now I'm realizing 15 years later that it's different. And he fixed it, right? And move on. There is no space for ego or being pride when you are doing these things, right? It's important to realize that you are doing approximations. And sometimes you realize that some better. So always stay on the technical part. That's something that university learning doesn't finish when you finish your bachelor's or your master's or your PhD. That's something that you have to keep going. And in my opinion, Geo Institute does a great job with the geo-congress and also with all the stuff, even the ones that we do on YouTube, right? It's a lot of content that are educational. The lab, extremely important. I like to show this picture. You can see on the right is me now, and what you see on the left is me like 20 years ago. The hair is gone. I don't know. My wife said that it's for good. I don't know. I miss it. But, those pictures to me are awesome because it shows the passing of time and still being involved with the lab. And this is at the University of Pittsburgh. But, it's extremely important to spend time at the lab. You are never going to learn how soil and rock behaves until you see it. You have to go and play, right? You have to put unconfined compressions on clay and try to vary the speed, right? And see if you get more strength or less strength. And then try to do the same with a direct shear. Right? Try to do it fast, slow, try to do the same in sand, clay, understand liquid limits, understand what is a high plasticity, understand what is a liquid limit of 80, right? And what the material looks like. So that's another thing that he never stopped. As you saw in the picture that I showed at the beginning, until the end, he was always spending time on the lab. And the field. go back again in similar fashion, you will never be a successful designer if you don't really understand how things are being constructed, right? You have to, I know what I'm saying is extremely complicated, right? Because how are you going to mix university, lab, and contractors? But you have to. I mean, it is the only way to cover all aspects. If you go deep in one and not the other ones, you are missing out. And Terzaghi always recognized that you have to master the three, right? Even if the field means being outside when it's cold in the Northeast US, and as long as the drill shop machine keeps working, you keep working. So to me, all this goes to the end, which is you need to understand this because that's the essence of geotech. Once you arrive this point, and I hope this is not going to be too controversial, you're going to really realize that all equations are wrong, right? And that's kind of what Terzaghi was also saying. The equations that we have is just numerical representations to justify our answers. Everything really comes from experience. The world for geotech was designed before we even have Terzaghi, right? If you think about the timing that I was going, you have buildings like the Empire State Building already in place, right? You have all kind of, infrastructure projects that were going on. They were done, but they were done super empirically and very over-designed. But what it shows is that experience is a huge component. We can refine and do things better with our equations, but our equations are limited. They have limited ranges of applications. They are all right. They are also all wrong. It depends on what you are using it. So this really leads us to the difference between what is science and what is engineering, and in particular geotech engineering. The difference between a scientist and a geotech is that the scientist believes that the equations are perfect and the world is the one that is wrong, right? So the world doesn't really correspond to the equation, right? But the equation is perfect. The geotech engineers know that the equation is nothing. I mean, the world is the world, and the world does whatever it wants to do. The equations are the ones that sometimes adapt, right? You can use bearing capacity equation for certain ranges. You can design piles, and depending what pile you're doing, you're going to have a different set of equations that apply for that particular technology in certain range of loads. So once you understand the difference between science and engineering, then you really see how a practice can be done. And that's the reason that the Gottman book is The Engineer as an Artist. This is an art more than a science. That led me to believe on something that is said as the last bullet there, which is not really from Terzaghi, but I think it really represents. This actually comes from one of his students, Juarez Vadillo. He ended up being one of his students, and then he started geotech engineer, or was one of the pioneers of geotechnical engineering in Mexico. He unfortunately passed very recently. I have the opportunity last year to do a couple presentations in Mexico. The Mexican Society of Geotechnical Engineering actually gave me a very nice magazine that is a recollection of his life, and all this is included there, and also another book. And he always used this equation saying beauty, it's equal to logic divided by complexity. And this to me describes Karl Terzaghi in one equation. The more logic something is, the more logic a theory is, the more beautiful. And it's divided by complexity. The less complex it is, the more beautiful. Obviously things need to be complex, right? They need to be complex. I mean, they will become complex by nature, but you need to find that balance between logic and complexity to keep having elegant solutions that are beautiful, which is the work of Karl Terzaghi. I mean, the elegance that you see on the equations that we have from him, the definition of effective stress, all this, that's really what is all about. So the final Terzaghi lesson that I have, or that I feel that I learned, which is the most important from all, even if you don't care about geotech engineering, as if you find something in life that you love, right? Dedicate all aspects of your life to that, right? And there is no better feeling. And I'm extremely lucky that, I grew up in an engineering family, my dad being a civil engineer. I discovered engineering, civil engineering, and geotech, even though I didn't know the name geotech, at a very young age. And I have the privilege and I have the honor of having a career in all this. And there is no better satisfaction when your hobby becomes your profession and you actually even get paid for it. So you see there's pictures of me on the 80s with my little camera visiting rock slides, picture of me on the 2000s at MIT. That was the first presentation that I did in the US. I always like to think that, Terzaghi, the first place that he came was the MIT, right? When he started teaching. So it was quite an honor 24 years ago to have my first presentation here. So there, and then a version of myself these days at the Geo-Congress 2024 in Vancouver. Again, you can see how the engineer kind of goes down with time. But it's that. I mean, it's basically going back to Terzaghi enjoyed his life because he loved geotechnical engineering, all aspects, and he dedicated every single aspect of it geotech engineer and to the society and to the people, right? I mean, part of what you saw in all these pictures is the people and how he celebrated people in, around, and he absolutely and genuinely loved to travel the world and meet geotechs and meet different conditions. And I guess I know I have been saying this is the final, but there is one more that I end up adding very recently, which I also realized, and is you will always run out of time. And Terzaghi ran out of time. He did not have all the time that he needed in his life. He always wanted to publish on foundations, as I mentioned before, and that never happened. It ended up coming into the theoretical soil mechanics and soil mechanics in engineering practice. He also, Peck later on ended up publishing what Terzaghi wanted with his famous book. And Terzaghi never got to do anything on rock mechanics. Towards the end of his life, he has many entries on his journals that, he wanted to do explanations of rock mechanics with the principle of geotech engineer, but he never really had the chance to do it. It doesn't matter what we do, we will always run out of time. And many people ask me and say, like, I do a lot, right? I mean, I keep my job at AGES doing consulting, I teach at Pitt, and I literally go everywhere anyone invites me to give a presentation. What is my motivation? Is Terzaghi's running out of time. I mean, like, I always constantly feel I'm running out of time. I want to do as much as I can. So for anyone that is listening for a Geo Institute chapter, I'm available. Give me an invitation. We'll make it happen. I am very interested in check every single chapter. I want to meet every single Geo Institute member and see projects and see conditions. So that's another thing that I always take with me, right? Terzaghi never really had the chance to do rock mechanics, and we will all run out of time. It doesn't matter what we do. We are not going to be here enough, right? So use every day as is the last one that you're going to have on geotech. So with that, I just close with this picture, one of my favorite pictures. This one, actually, Mike Bennett is the one that connected me to this picture. It shows the man, it shows the friendships with everyone that he was working on. I've been extremely lucky to also have teams and develop teams around me, people that I will always be in debt, like Adam Maydar, Todd DeMico, Taylor Dacanal, Mike Romeo, colleagues like Suresh Gupta, Yohiro Yoshida. It's decades working with them. And the memories that we build together are very special in my heart, the same way that Karl Terzaghi developed all these friendships, right? That stay forever. So that's all I have. I hope you like what I had. I don't know, Brad, if you want to go into any questions or anything like that.
That was pretty good.
Thank you. I told you, man, I was going for something special, right?
I do have a bunch of questions. So I put in the chat, and I will reiterate this again. For our viewers, if you have questions for Sebastian, put them right in the chat. We'll get to them. I'm going to ask a few here first. Terzaghi Day is always that kind of day where please don't ask Sebastian questions about landslides and stuff. As much as he would love to answer those, we can do that another day. So I guess where I want to start is maybe back at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned, I feel like this always gets mentioned when you talk about somebody who was really legendary in any field, that he wasn't the greatest student or not necessarily the best student. I wondered if you could relate that to your own experience. I'm not saying that you weren't the best student, but what I'm saying is that what today is about really is more about life lessons and talking about the legacy of someone like Karl Terzaghi. Talk about a time when persistence was really key to your career, maybe when you were in school and you thought you weren't going to get to the point that you're at now. How did something like that impact you?
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, there is a lot of things to say about that. I mean, Terzaghi was not the best student simply because he didn't find anything, he didn't really have anything that was interested in him. And there were a couple professors that changed that. And really change change the way that he was. I think in my life, I mean, I'm a little different because I have always been a good student. I think. I mean, I always like what I had. I mean, I give that to my dad and my family. I mean, everyone in my family is a civil engineer. So since I was a kid, I knew what I wanted, right? So that in that respect is different, but. I'll tell you something that happened last week. So last week I was in Medellin, Colombia, giving a presentation, a seminar in EAFIT, which is a local university there. And it made me realize something that started getting in my head also in July. In July, I was in Cartagena, in Colombia, also giving another course. For these two opportunities, I invited my dad because my dad, was, my dad always is a key figure in my life. And it's close to Colombia. So I say, hey, let's go and do this together. Now, when I was in these two places, walking to the venues and stuff like that, it made me realize, like, I've been, I used to walk these streets 27 years ago, almost like that, right? Like, and I just remember the first thing that came to my mind is how bad I wanted to be a geotech engineer and a civil engineer. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I had the school that I got on Columbia, my high school, was a great school. Don't take me wrong what I'm saying, but it was not the best in academic education. It was the best on social etiquette, but not on academic. Yeah, and I just remember during those years that I always felt that I was way less than anyone in those classes that I was taking in those courses because my education was full of voids that I start feeling with the years, right? But I just remember walking on those streets last week and in Medellin and before in Cartagena and remembering how bad I wanted this, right? I really wanted. And at that time, for example, in Medellin, I was going there because my dad was having meetings for projects, right? And I was walking the streets thinking about this while he was having meetings. Then going back 26 years or something like that, I'm with my dad. He's retired. He's enjoying the hotel. He's the one walking the streets. And I'm going to these venues to give presentations. And I was talking to him about that because I said, it's so awesome to see how life can get to you. And not to deviate too further, but I mean, you probably know, and most people know, my dad was kidnapped when I was with him in Colombia in a project. He was doing a project. The guerrillas from the FARC came, and he ended up being kidnapped. I was right there. He got taken from me. I ended up going back to Bogota. I actually landed in Bogota. I was 11 years old when this happened. And I was the one telling my mom the news. Like, it was her birthday. And I was like, happy birthday. By the way, my dad just got kidnapped, right? We were far from Bogota, and now we have to deal with this. He was kidnapped for 3 months. He was in the jungle. It ended up being a successful kidnapping in the sense that he came back alive, which not everyone in Colombia in the 90s could say that. But it really gave me a perspective in life at a young age that it goes back into the last lesson from Terzaghi, which is we are running out of time. My life could have been very different, right? I mean, my dad came back and I have a great childhood, right? After that, obviously, he came back and he gave me a chance on life. And when I was last week and when I was in Cartagena with him, I got a second chance, right? I got a second chance that allowed me to do everything that I have today. And when I look back and it's like, it's so amazing. I'm so grateful. But it also gave me, since I was 11, that mentality of never stop. You always have to be productive every day, and you can never leave anything for later. So I think that's part of, what I'm trying to say on the question, which I know I deviate a little bit, is it's important to appreciate that, right? It's like, it's important to find what you want, even if you are not the best student because you are not finding what you really want. You have to work on that, and you have to find it and then go heavy and hard into that. And I think Terzaghi did. Terzaghi also had a lot of adversity, World War I, World War II, right? Not everyone has to work with Hitler. I'm going to become the right hand of this guy, and I don't want that, right? So it's all how you bounce from adversity and the lessons that you learn more than anything, right? So.
No, that was really good, though. But you said you deviated a little bit. I think most people know, though, when it's 3rd and 2 and you need a little run to the right with Sebastian. Sometimes you just break one off to the left side and go for like 40 yards. So we were good there.
Did I surprise you with that bump?
I like it, though. You know what's coming. You just don't know exactly what it's going to be. So a question that somebody put in the chat, it's simple enough. Is there a family tree of Terzaghi disciples? I think this is one where, there are people that I think we would all agree on were obviously, mentored by Terzaghi, studied under him, but there's some opinion in that maybe too. So I'm going to ask you that question. If you had to make a Terzaghi tree, not unlike the one that's over here on the table in my office.
Yeah.
Who would be that next generation, and then maybe who's next after that?
Yes, it is. I mean, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and it's extremely important to recognize all of them, right? So you have Terzaghi as the one that started it all. When you look his generations, he had students from MIT, students in Vienna, students in Harvard, right? And now we're talking on a second level. Arthur Casagrande, it's a hero of geotechnical engineering. As I said, I mean, he has the name on the limits apparatus and, the Casagrande also on consolidation, but he doesn't have all the credit. He's like the Hamilton of geotech. Lin-Manuel Miranda should do a Hamilton production on Casagrande for geotech, because the same way that Hamilton was not that famous until Lin-Manuel Miranda did this, Casagrande should have that. Most people don't even know that Arthur has a brother that was Leo, right? Which was also extremely important. So you have that generation. You have Gilboy. You also have, obviously, Peck, right? There is different ranges there. Borslev, right? And I guess Vierrum, also in some respect, when he was in Vienna. Then that generation ended up having another generation, right? Which is, let's say, the advisors that we had or I had when I was doing PhD. So we're talking like different layers of the cake. And then it goes and it's fascinating. And I think, I mean, what you did, Brad, on the Geo Congress this year in Vancouver, that video of Oasis Champion Supernova with all those pictures, right? That to me shows like the new generation, right? And I'm not saying new, like, younger, but what I'm saying is the one that we live with, the ones that we learn. And it is extremely, it's fascinating to me. And that's the reason that everywhere that I go, I always try to create that tree, right? And try to see what was the connection. I was presenting in UT Austin last year, and Terzaghi loved UT Austin. I mean, he loved the place. He loved Austin in general. He was looking for any opportunity to go and give a lecture there. One of his students is the one that started the program. So I start talking about this, and I say, how many of you know? And they really didn't know. I'm not blaming the students. What I'm saying is we need to work on making this more famous. Yeah. I'm putting all my money on Mike Bennett to produce one of these books, and I'll be his technical assistant on that. But to me, it's extremely important to go back and recognize all this, right?
So for you then, I put this question in the chat just because it's always remarkable to me how people are connected to someone like Terzaghi. I always say there are no mathematicians alive today that ever met Archimedes. There are no, I looked it up while you were speaking. The first known doctor was Imhotep in ancient Egypt. There's nobody alive that knew him personally. I mean, what is your Terzaghi tree then? Like, what's your lineage to go back to Terzaghi?
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so the direct connection will be I met Ralph Peck. Ralph Peck was, very linked. But obviously, I mean, I met Ralph Peck the same way that many of my generation met Ralph Peck when he was a god and he was going to geo congresses and geo conference. I mean, but I cannot say that I have a close relationship with him, right? My advisors in Colombia, Arcesio Liscano and Bernardo Caicedo, Arcesio Liscano did his PhD in Germany. He had some connections with like people that were students directly from Terzaghi. Bernardo Caicedo also was in France with similar case. Then when I came to the States, my advisor was Luis Vallejo. And, he was one of the, he's probably the most influential person that I have in my education, especially in my PhD at university level. So he was like, let's say, one-step generation. He was not a Terzaghi student. He was one of the students of one of his students. So he's like a grandkid on that, right? But then, I mean, that's a generation. But I think we also live in a different generation that is full of superstars that were close by. And that's what I was saying, that video that we put, right? I mean, when we have people like Duncan and Mitchell and, I don't know, going into all the programs, right? And even Mesri and going in Illinois, Hashash, and we go to Berkeley, right? And all that great school that we used to have there, or we still have there. It's to me, it's super exciting to be able to travel the universities around the world and see the new generation and trying to relate them with the previous one. I mean, keeping in mind also that all the information now has been disseminated, right? I mean, I collect books, I collect geotech books, but I don't use them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have these first editions, but it's not like I go at night and read them. They are right here on my right on my library. But I mean, I don't know if I told you, but like Mike Bennett is like my pimp in that respect. He texts me like 3 a.m. on a Saturday, and I'm like, dude, they are selling an original copy of this book in Austria. But you have to pop quick. It's like you have to do a PayPal. It's like, all right, let's get this, right? So, but that's for collection. That's just for hobby, right? But the textbooks that we use in class, they are the same, right? No matter where you are. So I think it's interesting. I mean, everything has been very disseminated, but it's absolutely interesting to go back and look the connections, right? And always realizing we live in the shoulders of giants.
We got a couple questions from the audience, but I want to ask you a quick follow-up to that one because you kind of walked right into it. Do you think that right now we're living in another golden age for geotech? I mean, it's tough.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's a really incremental field. It's not like medicine where, you know, when somebody when somebody creates a cure for a disease, that's just earth-shattering for everybody. We don't have anything like that in civil engineering, really, or in geotech. Well, so how do you know that we're in a golden age like that?
Yes. So I'll refer, because, I mean, dude, you have to understand my summer was all Terzaghi lectures and Terzaghi days and stuff like that. So I have to, all my examples are with that. I think my wife is also tired that everything to me is relatable to a Terzaghi thing. So I'll go back to Don Bruce, Terzaghi lecturer, right? And his Terzaghi lecture was about the leapman, right? And it's basically describing what you're saying. Certain fields have like one person that create a leap. Other fields don't. I mean, the internet or, you know, things like that. If I ask you who created the internet, I don't know, man, a bunch of people, right? Teams of people, right? But when you go back to geotech, it was Terzaghi. It's absolutely historically that he was the one. You have works by others before, but he was the leap man, the one that brought us to the next level. So I also recommend that one if anyone wants to watch it on YouTube. Don Bruce is an awesome speaker, and that Terzaghi lecture is beautiful. So right now we live in a different area. There is no one leap man. I don't believe there is one that is going to make the big jump. But we are in a process, or we're in a continuous evolution that get us into a better place year after year. We have amazing universities, as I was describing before, right? I mean, professors that are doing research on insane things. And it's one of my hobbies when I visit, you know, I was looking some stuff that we're publishing for DFI this morning. I have the opportunity to go early this year and visit Luis Arboleda and what they are doing with auger cast piles. And they are doing all the simulation of auger cast pile testing and things like that with Florida DOT. We're making piles that are taking, as I mentioned at the beginning, piles that are taking 3 times the capacity they were taking a decade ago, right? We keep inventing things from the academic point of view, proving them, doing theories, doing all this. We have amazing contractors, right, that keep pushing the industry, right? And we have great consultants that keep designing these projects and everything. What we lack right now is more interest on people to come in on our field. And that's something that we're working with DFI and the Geo Coalition and Geo Institute, because right now, for any geotech that is graduating, you are in a golden age, man. You put a resume out there, and you know the way that I have to recruit for people to come to AGES is like a college coach, man. I almost have to visit the families and have dinner with the moms, saying, "I will take care of your daughter. I will take care of your kid," right? If they work for AGES. So, what I'm saying is, it's a market that is shrinking. People, I don't know, they want to do TikTok instead of geotech. But the priority that we need to put is also bringing that. But what we have right now, it's amazing, it's astonishing, and it's exciting. It's a very exciting field to be on.
So Mario Ruel, one of the past presidents of the Canadian Geotech Society and a railway guy, put this in the chat. Did Terzaghi have a particular interest in building railroads? He often provided examples from railway construction.
Yes, that is a great. I appreciate the question. Yes, I mean he wanted all projects of infrastructure, right? I mean, I think, for example, in my case, I have built a career mostly on transportations, right? Like landslides for transportation, foundations. I mean, always did the same geotech. I also have done oil and gas, and I do a lot of work, for example, with pipelines and you know, water lines and things like that. But my area has been mostly transportation. Terzaghi have a lot of dam experience, but he also did everything. He did rail tracks, he did highway. He was basically doing everything, you know, everything that was around that he could do. So rail tracks was a big part, especially in the UK. There is, for the true fans of Terzaghi, if you read the Engineer as Artist, you can see that Terzaghi has phases of his life. He was falling in love with different countries and regions of the world. And one of them was the United Kingdom, England, all that. He did a ton of work on rail tracks over there too. And the same as Canada. Canada was like the latest gig that he got. So, but yeah, it was very important, transportation to even airfields also, right? With the Proctor and modified Proctor and all that.
We've got another one from the chat, which is very similar to one I was going to ask.
I have time.
I was going to ask you anyway. So it's the classic, right? If Terzaghi was alive today, So this question was, what do you think he would think of the current state of geotechnical engineering? And then the follow-up there is, how do you think he would use AI to continue advancing the field of engineering? My version of that was, what aspect of engineering today would surprise him the most? So I guess you can combine all of those.
Yes. Well, the first thing is he will criticize me for too many selfies. I'm sure he will say, you take way too many selfies on your projects. You need to be more focused on the job. I mean, I can imagine a personality like that being disapproval of that, which I will justify that is for the love and the proud of the structures that we do. But no, going back in seriously, Terzaghi actually did have exposure to in the late part of his life, especially with Skempton. Exposure to a field that was evolving, not exactly on what he created, right? The triaxial was not created by Terzaghi, right? Terzaghi, as I say, Terzaghi was a simple guy. A can of tobacco, I'll do a consolidation on that, and a permeameter, right? But he starts seeing triaxial, he starts centrifuge. I mean, there is widely documented the opinions that Terzaghi had on the centrifuge and why it may not be the best at that time. It was a world that was evolving, that it was getting out of his hands. But he also understood that things were going to move forward in different ways that he will anticipate. I think he will welcome all these, I think he will welcome all these technologies and all these things. I think he will be impressed on numerical modeling, mostly, because I don't think that he ever imagined that we'll be running the softwares that we're running, PY curves, things like that, find an element, discrete element, let's say Plaxis and, everything, what Itasca does, what all these companies, what Rock Science, I mean, the slope stability, I think that part, it still amazed me. And I was born in the 80s playing Nintendo, or the 70s playing Nintendo, so I can imagine how he will be. I also imagine he will criticize a lot of what we do in terms of going too much in detail into science and losing a little bit of the practical aspect of things, which is not a critique to anyone in particular, but you know what I'm saying? Sometimes we tend to focus too much in certain areas, and that's when we have to go back and think about the three aspects that I was describing, right? You always have to think, we all started this same as Terzaghi. We wanted to propose solutions and designs, not only going into very pure academic exercise. It's extremely important to go deep in research, right? But at some point, you have to always keep the prize on the eyes, right? Or the eyes on the prize. Is basically always remember, what was all this for, right?
I think something that always surprises me too is not necessarily that people would be shocked at the capabilities that we have. I would say this, not just necessarily modeling, but the computing advances in general, but that people would want to use them rather than standard old school tests, visual monitoring, stuff like that until even 15 years ago was what the majority of the people in the profession were doing. So
I think Terzaghi would welcome it. I'll give you an example. Last year, I was visiting Columbia University in New York, and I took. I love that place. It's also one of the first places that I give presentations, like 22 years ago when I came to the States.
Sebastian doesn't give preference to places with Columbia in the name, even if it's spelled differently.
And when I went there, I took a picture with obviously Columbia has the centrifuge machine, right, which is awesome. And I took a nice picture, and I posted on LinkedIn, and I got a ton of comments. And one of the comments was basically saying, do you know that Terzaghi was not the best friend of centrifuges, and he actually criticized them a lot. And I know because I remember reading it before, but that's what I'm saying. I don't think he will approve everything we do. I think he will criticize certain things. I think he will also, as the very smart person he was, he will see, maybe an initial negative reaction, but I think he will realize all the cool things that you can do and that everything has an application, right? And he will be welcoming into that.
Got a couple more here.
We have time. I still have tea.
One more from the chat is kind of a general question, but it's in the spirit of the day. Do you have any specific advice for those of us that may have focused on geotechnical engineering in our education, but are working in other sections of the industry, such as contracting?
Yeah, never associate geotech only with design, right? That's what I was saying at the beginning. Is geotech, the way that Terzaghi saw it, is the full thing. I mean, that's the beautiful part of the Geo Institute. I mean, it's not only deep academic research and students doing PhDs, and it's not just consulting engineers or contractors or suppliers, right? I mean, suppliers are extremely important. Suppliers are not just the ones that fabricate the product, they also advance the product. Geotech is a very complex world of all these things. So if you're in contracting business, that still has a lot of geotech principles. Geotech at the end is solid mechanics. I mean, it's basically statics. What we do is summatory of forces in X, Y, and moments. And, that's the reason that I love it. I'm the biggest fan of the free body diagram. And what I do, what I do every day is what I wanted to do when I was in high school and I was learning physics, keeping things very simple. So I feel in some respect, people tend to, I don't want to sound bad to geotech, but people tend to believe geotech is a lot more complex than in reality it is. Rick Deschamps, one of good friends and mentors from Nicholson Construction, he always said you have to design from gut. When you design from gut, you do the thing, you see the solution, you see the pile that you have. And if your stomach doesn't feel good, it's not a good design. So, that to me, it's as good as an equation, right? So my point is that geotech, it's a lot based on experience and what you have seen, right? And Terzaghi was the first one to say it. So, yeah, the advice is you are doing geotech. If you are in the contractor world, you are doing geotech. It may be a little different what you think is the traditional geotech, but it's equally valid.
I think we're going to close out with a technical question here that just came in. What do you think about Terzaghi's bearing capacity equation? I think it overestimates the capacity. So, why close with something nice and simple? We're going to give you an opportunity to create a little controversy here with the community.
All right, so I'll tell you. Terzaghi bearing capacity, the first time that I saw it, it made me mad, extremely mad, because I learned solid mechanics with a great professor, ASCE in Colombia in 1999. And it was so basic and it was so simple, right? So everything was simple, effective stresses, consolidation. I remember taking solid mechanics and thinking, my God, if I can make a life out of this, if I can get paid for doing consolidation settlements, this is easy, right? And it's not that easy, but anyway. So I remember taking solid mechanics, being very happy, then taking foundation engineering. And the first thing that I go on my foundation engineering class with a really good professor too, Juan Carlos Navarro from University of Illinois, and he was teaching in Colombia, he goes and copies the Terzaghi bearing capacity equation. And I was like, what the hell is this, man? N gamma, NQ, exponential terms. It's like, this is not effective stress, gamma H minus gamma of water times H. So I started learning it. So my first reaction was, I hate this thing. My second reaction was, let's give it a try. Let's give it a chance. Let's try to break the terms. Let's try to understand the wedges. Let's see how the math goes, the friction on each wedge. And then I love it, right? I love it, and I pass from thinking, this is amazing, from this sucks to this is really good. Then I got an experience with that after I took my classes. I'm still a university student. I was doing my master here in Pittsburgh. My wife, at that time my girlfriend, she was still in Colombia. She was doing like a senior design project, and she asked me, what is the bearing capacity for a tank? I need to have the bearing capacity on a soil that is like a clay with this. So I said, I know there's a bearing capacity equation, so give me the footing width, and I'll give you your bearing capacity. And she at that time said, no, I don't know. That's the reason I'm asking you bearing capacity, so I can have the tank, right? I need to know the tank size, but if you give me, and I say, no, sir, I cannot do bearing capacity without the size. And then my wife has been a very key part in my life, Ana Maria. She said, are you telling me that you cannot calculate a bearing capacity unless you have the value of B, the width? And I say, yes, I cannot do it because it's the second term on Terzaghi's bearing capacity. And she said, well, that's weak. And I just remember the word weak. And I said, what do you mean? I'm doing a master's here, a PhD in geotech. And she said, well, you should know. And I just remember feeling so deflated, even though it was my girlfriend at that time. I'm like, well, this sucks. So I went back and I looked on different tables and I was like, okay, well, I can give you an estimate. But it kind of made me realize that it's like, wow, this sounds really precise. Like I cannot really get, on a sand, I cannot really get a bearing capacity unless I have B. How weak is this equation? I'm not weak. Terzaghi is the weak. That's what I thought at that point, right? But then with time, I started seeing the beauty of it. I remember the day that not to get super technical, but if anyone remembers, the first time when you are in clay, Andrean shear behavior, it's going to be pi plus 2 times Andrean shear strength of clay, which is 5.14 shear strength of clay, right? If you use a factor of safety of 2, you're going to basically get the Andrean shear strength multiplied by 2, right? That will be your allowable. And then I think every geotech engineer goes to this day and say, wait a minute, that right there is the same as the unconfined compression of clay, right? So let me just say it one more time for those that are following. It's 5.14 Andrean shear strength. You divide by a factor of safety, let's say, of 2.5. So that gives you 2 times undrained shear strength. If you take 2 times undrained shear strength, that will be your allowable, right? That is pretty much the unconfined compression of a clay, which is like, wait, so what you're telling me is that the bearing capacity of a confined footing is the same as if I just take a part of clay, take it out, and test it on the unconfined compression machine. And it is. So that's when you say, well, I know what Terzaghi was doing. He was just being careful and covering his back, right? Doing all this theory, giving me an answer that is like, well, I could have done, even though I didn't until that day. But I also realized that that equation is beautiful, not only because the theory and all that, but it also has a huge component of observation and experimentation, right? That is very suddenly in that. So I do like it. I do agree. It's a little over-predicting. I mean, we all know when you work enough on foundations that your foundations typically end up controlled more by settlement than actually bearing capacity in failure. So your deformation is going to be the one controlling, but it works. I mean, as I said, every equation is wrong. Every equation is right. You just need to know what are you using for and in what range. And that's the beauty of geotech. And the best part of that is that there is no way to learn it than doing this thing for decades, right? So that's, that's the part to me that is valuable. Experience is everything in geotech engineering. And I know at the beginning it's hard to swallow it because that happened to me. I finished my PhD and I thought I was ready to conquest the world. And then I realized I still have a ton of learning to do. So, but that's life, right? You get paid while you learn, so it's all good.
That was a great answer. I don't even know what my favorite part about that was, but well, one, I like that somebody knew to ask that question to get you going, and I love that it involved your wife. I think that that's perfect. That's a good way to wrap up, I think. Oh, Sebastian, thank you for doing this today.
No.
I know you put in the time to do this, but I also know that everything you talked about today was not just because of the research that you did over the last couple of months. I know you live and breathe this stuff, so Absolutely. It was really cool to have you do this today. So thank you.
No, I appreciate it, Brad. And I mean, obviously I did a lot of stuff this summer, but I've been having these things for a while, like all the stories. I think most people listen them when we are at the Geo Congress and we're drinking beers at the bar and somebody say, hey, you want to talk about Terzaghi? And then I go until 3 a.m. telling all these stories and other stories that we cannot share here. But it is, I mean, Karl Terzaghi is a legend. He's the person that started everything. He's definitely a live man that gave us everything we have. We will not have the jobs that we have today if it's not for him. We will not be the people that we are if it's not for him. I will not have the life that I have. I would not be in Pittsburgh. I would, you know what I'm saying? It's like everything we have is thanks to him. And I think ASCE and Geo Institute do an amazing job on trying to keep that alive. I mean, if he was here with us, I think he will be extremely happy to see that the society that he fell in love the first time that he went to New York City is honoring him in such a way. So that's all I have to say.
That is awesome. For our viewers, thanks to all of you for being with us today on this. This is the 9th time, I think, that we've officially celebrated Terzaghi Day. It's been a really good one. Again, check that chat box over in the right. I put a couple of links in there during the presentation, including the Terzaghi lecture playlist from the GI YouTube channel, the Dick Goodman book that Sebastian talked about a couple of times during his presentation. It's, of course, published by ASCE, so you can get that right from ASCE.org. If you liked what you saw today, and you're here at the end, so I think you probably did, again, click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we'll let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. I also put a link in the chat for our next live stream, which is just 8 days away. If you have not had enough Pittsburgh, we have the Geostructures Conference coming up in November, and our next live stream will be our second sneak preview for that conference. It's going to be Brian Heinzel of Gannett Fleming talking about the Mount Washington landslide remediation in the city of Pittsburgh. So you're going to want to join us for that one. You can, of course, register for free at our Eventbrite page, the same as you can for every other live stream that we do. So with that, this was our Terzaghi Day live stream. Sebastian, thanks again. I hope this was fun.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you very much, Brad. I appreciate it.
We will see everybody super soon. Our producer today was Amber Davis. We'll be back in 8 days with our next live stream. Happy Terzaghi Day. Woo!
Happy Terzaghi Day.